In this video, I'm going to show you how we can use WhereScape RED connected to Snowflake within a CI/CD workflow. So if you're a data engineer and you're looking to use modern CI/CD practices because your current workflow doesn't allow you to automatically change or send changes to your data model or your data pipelines automatically, then let me take you through what I do using WhereScape RED to quickly and efficiently build a simple data model and how I can commit all those model changes up to Git. So whenever we set up a brand new instance of WhereScape RED, we have to go through the process of setting up the enablement pack. So this is a one-time setup and it follows the same process you would follow whenever you create a RED repository. So the first thing we need to do is to create a Postgres database. Here we are in Postgres, and if I expand this out, I want to create a brand new database, and I've used the database naming convention that will be in the setup, and now we have everything we need. We need to make sure we have an ODBC, which I have already set up, so you can see we have an ODBC for the enablement pack, and if I go into this and hit test, you can see the ODBC connects to the database. The next step is to launch WhereScape RED's setup. Now I'm going to create a new setup for the new repository, validate that so it can connect, and then I'm going to find the location of my enablement pack. I've already downloaded the Snowflake enablement pack, and this will deploy all the required targets, and I can now start to set up. Now I've already created another ODBC for my Snowflake target. If I go to my data warehouse connection, you can see it here. If I put in the password, it will successfully connect. So I know the ODBC is fine, my username and password's fine. Add a target to connect to my data warehouse. I'm going to call it a custom, but on your license it will say Snowflake. And I'm also going to add in some standard schemas that I want my objects to be deployed to. I'm going to validate all of that and wait for it to come back to say yes, and it's come back okay, and I'm going to click on add. So for now I'm going to click on next. I'm going to leave the source system for the moment, click on next, and then start the deployment process to set up the RED repository to work with Snowflake. Excellent, so that's now been done. I'm going to click on finish. Now I can log into WhereScape RED and complete the installation of my enablement pack. So from here I'm going to click on OK, and at this point it's going to ask me which connection do you want to configure. So I'm going to configure the data warehouse. I recommend that you install the Python or PowerShell modules you wish to use. I'm going to install both, but I'm also going to reset the extended properties and click on OK. I now need to find the location of my enablement pack, so I'll do that here and click on OK. And I'm going to say yes to Python, so click on OK there. I'm going to say no to picking a profile because one's already been created. So now what will happen is all the metadata needed to interact with Snowflake will be deployed to my machine. All the required runtime files for Python will be installed as well. Just a reminder, this is a one-time only activity. Once everything gets into Git, everything is taken care of by the metadata stored in the Git repository. Now I have some questions. Where would I like to install the date dimension? I'm going to move that into star. Where would I like to store the file formats? Well, I've created another schema for that, so I click on OK. Where would I like to install the jobs? Again, I've created a schema for that, so I can pick on jobs. And now the remaining file format will be created. Cool. Right, installation complete. Can now, if I wish, open up my repository, connect to the database, and I can see all the database connections. I can now go in and start to add in all of the details for Snowflake, and I've just hit derive to bring in the name. I can update RED profile file, and then I can browse the connection, and you can see there's nothing in there. So the next step for me to do is to create the schemas to replicate what I've built out in my target environment. So I'll just hop over to Snowflake to do that. As you can see, I am now in the Snowflake environment, and if I want to, I can start interacting with the code. So I'm going to create a worksheet because I want to build out a new database. So I've got stage, I've got load, I've got stage, I've got star, business vault, raw vault, file format jobs. So I've got everything I need now, and I can now move back to my red environment. So now I have set up my schemas in my Snowflake. I've created an enablement pack based repository. I have the ability now to take a backup of this repository and use it in the process to initialize my CI/CD repository. So I'm going to head over to Postgres, and I'm going to create a backup of my red repository, and I'm going to save that somewhere that I can retrieve it later. So I'm just going to put it into temp, and I'm going to call it red backup. Now I've done all that, I can click on backup and the backup process will start. Now I have the backup, I can now start the CI/CD process to incorporate my enablement pack version of WhereScape RED into my CI/CD and start the process. As this is the first time I'm doing a setup for RED, I'm going to untick 3D. I can do both of these steps at the same time, but for simplicity I'm just going to follow a single path. This is a development machine, so I'm going to set it up for the development machine, and I've got my D tag for the environment, so inside my database name you'll have a D. I've also have the ability to drop schemas or databases, but for now I'm going to leave it as schema, and now I'm going to specify my GitHub repositories. Because I want to do an initial build, I'm going to say yes. And now I'm going to specify the Postgres repository I'm going to deploy to locally, and the name of the user I'm going to use to access the database. I'm also going to select what objects I want to create when I commit back to Git. So I want to produce DDL, I want to produce DML, and I want to produce JSON objects for each object inside of my red repository. I'm also going to pick a backup. So if I select files, I can now pick the red backup that I created earlier. Now in this process, it will check to make sure I've got the ODBC set up, and if not, it will throw me an error to say please set one up. But as I already have that, it will step through to the next part where I get to deploy to a branch. And of course, this is the first time out, I'm going to use the development branch to initialize the foundation of my metadata before I continue. So now the setup's been completed, the process is going to export all the existing metadata from the backup, including any added metadata needed for the CI/CD process, and it's going to export that out to the local Git repository before committing that to the remote Git repository.
A few moments later.
Now we can open up our red repository and we can see everything has been set up. I have all of my connections and my repository settings, and if I right mouse button and go to workflows, I also have all of my commands. So the first thing I could do, although we've already done it, is we could commit everything to Git. Now we've done all the changes and we've set up our initial repository, we might now want to start to do our build. So from here I can create a brand new connection for sales, and I'm going to pick an ODBC, and I've already set up a SQL database that has sales inside of it. So the first thing I'm going to do is build out all my load tables. So from here I can grab from my database in SQL, I can grab the order header and drag that in and build my load table. Now this is going to build a load table called load order header, and I'm just going to click on add. And as you can see, I can give it a detail, so order header details in the description. And from here, I'm going to step over these points for now, because I've got different options about how I can incorporate SSIS, or I can externally load this, but you have lots of options to incorporate a load function to push it out of the SQL Server database and push it into Snowflake. So I'm not going to generate load scripts, but I am going to create the table. By using create, this will build out the table in Snowflake for me. So if I now browse my data warehouse connection, I can now see in my load schema, I can see my order header. So I've now been able to do that. I can browse back on my SQL Server, which is brilliant, and I can start to continue to build the rest of my tables.
A few moments later.
So now I've built out all of my load tables. I can now start to build stage tables to build out my dimensions and facts. So the way I do that is I will browse my data warehouse connection, and I will start to use everything inside of the load schema to build out my stage tables. And the way we do that is by dragging in the load table into the stage, and we can start to create stage tables where we can manipulate objects together. So I'm going to bring in the load table, and I'm going to use that as the start for my dim product. I'm going to create a stage table and click on OK. I'm going to build a action script that helps me process the data. So now I've started to build this stage out. I can then bring in other fields from the other load tables, such as the description of the sub product, and I can drag that in and I can drop that into the columns. So as I do this, I can start to build out the various properties or the various attributes I want to see in my dimension before I then build out the procedure that will create the data and push the data into the stage table ahead of building out the dimension. So if I carry on using product line, I can bring product line description in. I can also bring in the product group description. Inside of this one stage table, I have 3 products, 3 additional properties to describe the product. I can now also remove any columns that I don't need and just leave myself with an appropriate dimension. Now I've built out the structure of the dimension, I can right mouse button and create, but now I'd like to manipulate the data and make sure that all of the relevant data is joined. So if I go into the procedure sat behind the stage table, so I'm going to hit procedure and hit rebuild, and from here I'm going to pick a stage procedure, and I'm going to make sure we truncate that stage table every time you run. And on the next page I can build how we connect the data together. So I'm going to use the join function, and I'm going to join the product load to product line, and what I can now do is find the product line code and connect it to the product line. I can now bring in the subgroup, product group code to product group code, and product subgroup code to product subgroup code. Now I could do both, or I could do one, so I might just delete the first one that I did, just remove it, and now I can add in the product group and grab the product group and do the product group. And if I click on next, it will show me how it's joining that all together, and I'm quite happy with that, so I can click on finish and click on OK. So now it's built a procedure behind the scenes using the metadata that will help me process the data from the load table into the stage table. So when you come back, I'll have the rest of the stage tables done. So now I've built the base stage tables, I want to commit to Git. So a simple way of doing that is right mouse button on any object, going to workflows and hitting commit all to Git. This will package up all the changes and it will then push it to the Git repository. And here we can commit to Git. So again, we can include, if we go back to our GitHub, we can go back to our issues, and in our issues we got use cases for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we can then incorporate this into our commit message. And by incorporating that in our commit message, once that's been pushed up, if we head back to Git and go to our development branch in the Git repository, commit message has been received, and if we jump to the commit message, you can see all of the objects that have changed as part of my last commit, and including the DDL and DML that I've built for the stage tables. And if you click on each one, you can start to see the information that's being created. So that's one way of tying up our commit message or our activity inside of RED back to any use cases that we might have, or use case or user stories that we might have in Git. So the next thing I need to do is I need to progress this to build out our dimensions and our facts tables. So if I jump into our dimensions, what I can now do is bring in or refresh my Snowflake repository to show me all of the new stage tables that have been built, and I can now elect to bring in my dimension dim customer. Click on add, make this a normal dimension. Again, I'm going to build it as a procedure, rebuild, which will create the object for me. You can see in the background it's automatically created a dimension key, and I'm going to click on create, and it's going to bring out the next stage to help me build out my dimension. So I'm going to select the business key, which is customer code, because I didn't do that in a previous step. I'm not going to delete objects because I want it just to add new values that are found every time it processes, and it's going to take everything from my stage table, and we're going to click on OK. So now I've built all of my dimensions for my stage table, and if I refresh my data warehouse view and expand the star schema, you can see all the various dimensions there. Now what I can do is start to build out a stage fact table that will help me bind my data to the dimensions, so my fact data to my dimensions, and I'll do that in the stages. But before I do that, I'm going to commit to Git. Right mouse button, workflows, commit to Git. So again, in the commit message, we can add something meaningful. And once that's done, if we jump back to our Git repository, in the development branch, you can see it's just committed and added dimensions. So again, this is helping us connect all the changes we're doing within the Git repository back to our user stories. And as you can see, every time we do a commit, you can see the audit all collect up in the... So now we've done the dimensions, the next thing to do is to build out our stage fact table. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to use the stage table that we've already built for orders as our base, and I'm going to drag that into my stage tables, and I'm going to call this fact order. Just going to keep this as a stage table for now. I'm going to change it as a procedure, but click on OK because I don't want to build out the procedure right now. What I want to do is I want to start to bring in the dimension keys that will be used in the fact table. Dim customer, we have dim order key or order date, dim product, and we have dim transaction date. So I also want to get rid of some of the things that are no longer relevant. So from here, let's create the table. So the table becomes physical, and then we can rebuild the procedure. And this time we can rebuild the procedure. We're going to use a procedure-based script, and the template will be permanent. Business keys will be order date, product, posted date. And we're going to truncate before we go, and then we're going to use the stage table. And here you can see the business keys that are going to be matched between the dimension and the key inside of the fact table. So for customer code to that one, order calendar date to order date. And then we've got the production key, and then the transaction was the posted date. And then we can click on OK. So now the procedure will be created and the fact table will be built around this stage. Last thing we can do is if we refresh data warehouse connection back to Snowflake, we can now expand out stage, and we can use the stage fact table to build out our simple fact table. So we'll drag that back in, call it fact orders, and then change that to procedure based. And we can rebuild, create. So we create the physical table. Now we're building the procedure, manage the fact table. And once we've done all of that, we can commit for a final time back to Git using the workflow, commit all to Git. And now we can put a final commit, completed the development of the star schema for #1. And as a final test, we can not only see the commit that's been pushed into our development environment and also look at what has changed as part of that, but we can also hop over to our Snowflake environment. As if I hit refresh now and interact with it in the UI, I can see the tables, the columns inside the tables. I can see the star schema. I can not only see the procedures that live in the star schema, but I also see the objects required to build our simple star schema. So as you've seen, I've been able to quickly and easily build a simple star schema data model and commit all of my changes up to GitHub. Using WhereScape RED helped to speed up the process of design, and it enabled me to spend time on the actual design of the data model rather than designing the code. I have full auditability through the GitHub versioning. Every time I made a change, I committed that to Git, and that enables me to see who changed what and when. Big advantage to working this way is how it enables me to scale my team. I can scale my team up or down depending on what's coming through the business and how much demand there is for my team, and it gives me the ability to build automated testing and peer review over my data model, enabling me to test the data model as it's being built. And that gives me the chance to avoid any failures with the data model at a future date. In my next video, I'll be using WhereScape 3D to deploy the model that I've built in 3D out to RED and reviewing the end results within Snowflake.